Welcome to Own Your Heart Health. I'm Dr. Regina Druz, your holistic cardiologist. This week, we will dive into common heart health concerns, uncovering root causes, and unpacking scientific discoveries and controversies. The information provided does not constitute medical advice. Please contact your healthcare practitioner before making any changes that may impact your health. Hi, my wonderful listeners. It's another Friday fun day. You know that I almost always record on Fridays, and my lovely guests are available on Fridays as well. So I have a really special guest today. I was thrilled that her team reached out and they wanted to have this conversation. I have Terry Tatiosian, and she represents the House of Rose. And most importantly for me, she represents sort of the sisters in entrepreneurship that I joined when I became an entrepreneur and launched my practice, launched my platform. And, Terry is a power woman whose focus as an entrepreneur is on women's health. And I am absolutely thrilled to have her today. So Terry, please tell us, how did you grow up to be who you are today? What was your journey?
Well, thank you, Dr. Druz, for having me on. I am ready to get all powered up.
You're welcome. Let's power up. No sleepy Friday afternoons. It's the power.
No, we never sleep. But it's a great question. It's a 50-year history I have. So I'm going to start at the beginning.
Okay, go for it.
We have all weekend. So I was born in Eastern Europe during communism and defected the area right before the wall fell in 87, and then 89, the wall fell. And then I came here to New York and got really busy, right? So immigrant, not even first generation, like generation zero immigrant. And my parents and I, my brother and my sister, were living in New York for many years and just grinding it out, living the American dream. Which is a scam, by the way. But anyway, so here I am turning 50 this year. I've done a lot of different things. I've worked in corporate. At one point I had 4 jobs, I think, in college. I was going to school full time, and I had, not 4 jobs, 3 jobs. I had 3 jobs. I had a 9 to 5, a 6 to 9, and a weekend job. I always worked. I don't really remember a time when I did not work. So the majority of my life is work. And at about 25, I got this brilliant idea that I was going to start doing my own thing, right? And I was still working in corporate, but that's when the .com era had begun. So 25 years ago, we're talking, and the internet was amazing. I was into AOL and all that stuff, and beepers, and then the Blackberries, and then Google was born, and I became fascinated. And so here we are.
Well, how does that, so first of all, I can so relate to your story because I'm also an immigrant from Eastern Europe, and I also got here right before the wall fell. For those who may not kind of know what wall we're talking about the Berlin Wall, because it's just making sure that people actually know which wall, because they may think that this is something that's happening on the southern border. But no, there was a wall right in the middle of Berlin that separated East and West Berlin. And those of us who were unlucky enough to be to the east of it always thought that we would never get to the west part, and so lots of films and interesting books. And so that moment, I came to New York also in 1987, and I do remember watching on TV how the wall came down. Until this day, I have not been in Berlin, but one day I'm going to go to Berlin because I want to stand exactly in that spot, and I want to have a tiny little piece of that wall. all, because that formed who I became as an individual, right? But you're right, this immigrant philosophy is that you grind, right? We grind until we succeed, because in the countries where it came from, didn't matter how much you would grind, you'll never succeed, so at least in the US, there's an opportunity. So how did it take you into the entrepreneurship focused on women's health and wellness? Sort of like, what was the trajectory?
Yeah, so I had ups and downs. I had big swings. Okay. So initially, my goal was to go to law school.
Okay.
And that's what I studied in college. I studied political science, political statistics, things like that. And I was gearing up to go to law school. But as life happens, it didn't work out that way. So I had to pivot. All right. So very quickly, I had to figure out, okay, so law school is not going to happen. I was living on my own in Queens, actually, by the time I was 20 years old. I was going to school at the same time. I was supporting myself. I had 3 jobs. I had all these things. My parents had moved to Florida at that time. So if you think about it, I had been in this country 7 years at that point. So I got here at 13. By the time I was 20, I was living on my own. I had my studio apartment. I'll never forget. It was $850 a month in Forest Hills, New York. All right. And
those were the days when the slice of pizza was 75 cents and the Subway token was $1, so.
Yes, it was $1.10. I'll never forget it. And so, yeah, so that's what I was doing. And I had to figure out, okay, so how do I stay in New York and not move to Florida? Because I didn't want to go. Think about the absolute craziness of that idea of having been in this country 7 years and living on your own, going to school, having ideas of going to law school, not being supported by your parents at that point, 20 years old. Yeah. And so it dawned on me that even if I finished college with political science, I wasn't going to get a job as a lawyer because I had to go to law school and somebody was going to have to support me. And I wasn't making enough money to pay for it on my own and whatever. Anyway. And that's when the .com era started booming. And all of my friends, most were immigrants from Eastern Europe, all the different Russian federations. So we all grew up together. We went to college together. We're still friends 30 years later. And so I have a lot of my friends were getting into computer science and computer engineering, computer programming, and the salaries back then were through the roof. I mean, if you think about it, 20 years old, the regular salary, maybe if you're lucky, was like $24,000 a year. But a lot of my friends were making 80, 90, 120. And at that time, that was a lot of money for a 20-year-old. It's a lot of money now.
It's still a lot of money now. So,
and so I was like, wait a minute, and then I looked at the average attorney salary for first year law graduate. It was about similar. And I was like, wait a minute, I can do this thing and make just as much, and I don't have to go to law school. So I jumped on that wagon and I loved it. I loved the whole computer field because you just never stopped learning. It never got boring. There was always something new happening. There was always new technology, new software, new, Python came out. And then after Python, you had the www world coming online and it was fabulous. So I took a bunch of courses for software engineering and I ended up getting hired by one of the biggest law firms in New York City as in their IT department. And I worked there for 7 to 8 years. I mean, salaries were through the roof. Back then, still are. Law firms are the best place to work, by the way. I love law firms. Great benefits. I had a month vacation. I had 401 matching. I had it made. Okay. And I decided to walk away from that. And so that's how my entrepreneur journey began, out of stupidity.
Well, what did you walk away to?
Oh
Or
my
to do? Well, you walked
gosh.
away to do what exactly?
You know, the irony of being an entrepreneur is that you leave your corporate job thinking, oh, I'm going to work my 4 hours a week. No. You get 4 hours of sleep. You're trading your corporate job to get 4 hours of sleep per week. But I had no idea, right? So I had just had my daughter, my first child. And so the commute was too much for me. So I just couldn't bear leaving her alone in daycare. I couldn't do it. I quit in the middle of the recession. And so, so that's how things evolved. I started doing computer work, computer engineering, software programming, web development, all that stuff as a consultant. And then it ended up that I started getting so much work that I had to hire people, I had to train people, I had to do all kinds of things. And then I discovered e-commerce. And that's when the light bulbs really went off, because at that time, Google was an infant. It was in its infancy. And so you could build an e-commerce store if you knew how to do it, and you could rank it in Google for whatever you wanted, because there's no competition. Not that many people knew how to do it. And so I spent quite a bit of time reverse engineering the Google algorithm. And at one point, I think I had like 9 different e-commerce stores for all kinds of different niche products, because I figured out if you only focused on one particular product, you could drop ship things and you didn't even have to carry inventory. And so,
which is still true, by the way. So
yes,
so that still holds.
Yes, but I was doing this 20 years ago. And so, so then I started doing all that, and I had all that going on. And then it started morphing into, well, can you consult? Can you be a consultant? Can you help this company? Can you help that company? And then, and then it just exploded. And then I found myself with 12 offices all over the United States, traveling nonstop, going just literally 18, 19-hour days, 2 kids at that time. And by the age of 37, I had gained 80 pounds. I was burned out. I had panic attacks, anxiety. I ended up in the hospital twice because I thought I was having a heart attack. And they said, here's the Xanax, go home. You're not having a heart attack. You're just super stressed out. And unbeknownst to me, entered perimenopause at 37. Nobody told me. Nobody even thought of it because of my age, I guess. I don't know. And then I figured out I was menopausal because I thought I was pregnant. I was like, no, you're not pregnant. You're now in menopause.
So let's stop here for a second, because I want to reflect on what you just shared, because I think does not get discussed often enough, right? The fact that we as women are expected to burn candle on both ends, so to speak, right? To be present at our job. And, obviously you chose more than just a corporate job. You chose entrepreneurial route, which is even harder, but also to be there and present for our families. And I think takes such an extraordinary toll on women's health, as somebody who lived that in my profession. I literally went into labor with my son. He was my firstborn when I was on call. I was on call for coronary care unit. And, at that time as a cardiology fellow, and, it's still in place till these days, you have what's called an acute myocardial infarction beeper. So basically when somebody comes in and they have a heart attack, the whole team gets called and you're part of the team. And I remember coming to the coronary care unit on Saturday morning, and I was not in my, scrubs. I was in my civilian clothes, and, the attending physician, his eyes sort of popped open and he said, are you coming for rounds dressed like this? I'm like, no, I'm here to give you the beeper because I'm going to labor and delivery. And his jaw just dropped, right? That, like, how is that even possible that, that she is going to labor and delivery? But, and I thought that labor and delivery was, honestly, I felt that God answered my prayers because I was so tired at that time that it was better to go into labor, my first labor, something that I have never experienced, and face, the uncertainty of it and the pain and everything else, than to be on call for the coronary care unit, because I just couldn't take sleep deprivation anymore. And I think this is what, people are searching for the fountain of youth, but in truth is that we have a structure, at least in this country, where we systematically destroying women's health from the very young age, because it's more than just the expectations, it's the infrastructure. Because even if a woman maybe takes a break during her pregnancy, or she goes to part-time employment, and you and I are both Gen X, part-time employment wasn't really a word for women in professions back then. We don't have a dedicated maternity leave. We don't have the infrastructure. When I came back after giving birth to my son, there was nothing in the hospital, and this was a leading healthcare system, and it now is one of the largest. No, honestly, it is the largest in New York. At that time, in early, sort of late 90s, early 2000s, there were no facilities for new moms that returned to work in their professional capacity, right? And my fellowship, I still remember this, that, they did right by me. They restructured some of my rotations, but, so I still finished on time with my group. But the amount of stress I remember just basically living at the top of that stress scale, not even knowing what it is like to relax. And it sounds like you've gone through the same thing.
It blows my mind what I did. I like thinking about it. I was like, how did I even survive? I mean, I feel like I barely did. I was working while I was in labor. I had my BlackBerry. I was answering emails. I was like, I'm too busy for this right now. Come back to the nurse. Come back. I got to finish this email. And they're looking at me like, what the heck is wrong with you? I'm like, no, can you give me like 5 more minutes? Like, what in the heck was happening? Right? And so I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, that's just not normal. And the other thing now that I think about is what we do to residents, doctors, right?
Nurses, doctors. Yep.
Yes. And, like they're supposed to be the example and the model that we're supposed to follow. Meanwhile, they're sleep deprived. They're extremely stressed out. They're overwhelmed, and they're burning the candle at both sides, yet they're responsible for people's lives. Right. And so it makes no sense to me. And, the only way it makes sense is that it's all about money. It's not a medical care system. It's a financial care system, right?
100%. It is a financial care system. And I have to tell you that, so I have 3 kids, my son is my oldest, and I have 2 daughters after him, and they're all young adults at this point. And, no one is in the medical field. And, there was a part of me that was a little slightly sad that none of them chose the medical field. I still have passion for medicine. I love what I do. But at the same time, I reflected on it, and I realized that I was actually happy that even though each professional vertical has its own challenges and ups and downs, I feel like where they've gone to, they have freedoms that I have not had for decades, right? For years and years and years, because of how the medical system is structured. And, and eventually that medical system, it wrecked my health, right? And that's how I became an integrative cardiologist and longevity doc. I left, academic positions that were promising and high profile, with people telling me, sort of like you, right? I just had to leave. People would tell me, what are you doing? This is career suicide. And I said, well, it's either career suicide or my body's demise, so which one is it going to be? So how did you deal with this? You discovered that, you gained a lot of weight, the burnout, the stress was off the charts, and your hormones shut down, essentially. And that's what, perimenopause, menopause is, a very young age. So what happened after that?
Yeah. So, the perimenopause stage was living hell, literally, because I didn't know what was happening. And so everything that was a prelude to that, I didn't know was just continuously piling up the stress and the symptoms and everything that was related to that. I thought I was losing my mind. There were very little answers. I had completely lost control of my body. I wouldn't eat for days and gain weight, like weird things like that, right? I couldn't sleep. Everything was upside down. And I attributed all of that to being overweight. So I thought, and I'm sure it was related, but I attributed that to you're overweight, you have to lose this weight. And so you got to do whatever you got to do to figure this out. And, you know, type A, overachiever, immigrant. I went on all the diets. I did it all. I was like, I'll be damned if I can't figure this out. Okay. Like there is no way we're failing this exercise. And I failed over and over and over again. At one point I counted, I had done 33 diets. Then I was like, man, how many diets are out there? And there's, by the way, anybody wondering?
you need, maybe you need like 50.
Anybody wondering out there, at the last time I checked, there were 30,000 diet books on Amazon. So obviously this is not working out very well for us because there's all this stuff out there, all these millions of diets that tell you what to do, how to eat, what not to eat, how much to do of this and that. And it's like information overload. And we're all overweight. So I'm like, how does this make any sense? Like, I just felt like so stupid at one point that I was like, that I can't figure out my own body. Like, how can I figure anything else out? Like, I live here and I don't know how to use this thing. Right. And so finally, and if you're anywhere, if you've been surrounded by entrepreneurs, you know, we're all overconfident. We have big egos. We think we know everything. We're going to figure it all out. We take action. We do all these things. I couldn't do it.
So what tipped the needle for you? What made the difference?
I had to ask for help outside of the system. So everything in the system, everything that was being presented to me as a solution was not working. Because I had the perfect storm going. I had perimenopause, overstressed, burned out, overworked, family, a lot of obligation, big expectations, a lot of responsibility, no time for anything, right? And so in the regular system, things are a lot, how should I say? They're not really put to us as do this now. It's a lot softer, or there's really not even like a suggestion, you know, oh, your A1C is 5.9. You know, you're kind of going to be,
we'll wait till it crosses the diabetic threshold and then we'll give you meds.
Right. And there's no like a big slap on the face. Like, what the heck are you doing? You're 37. What's wrong with you? Like, nobody really says that. And I have this feeling now when I'm observing, like, people are just tired, right? So the people that are there doing these things, they're exhausted too. And so they're not going to, exert energy fighting you and smacking you on the head and being like, the heck is wrong with you? You know, you need to lose weight ASAP, or you need to get control of your nutrition, or you need to start moving, stop sitting 18 hours a day or whatever it is. Right. And so you can't really expect that from the system. You have to take radical, honest, painful responsibility, be very, very transparent to yourself. Stop lying to yourself, stop being delusional, and don't expect anybody to come and save you and tell you like, hello, like, do this thing over here, or you're going to be on big doo-doo in a couple of years. Yeah. And so I had to ask for help outside of the system. And I got very lucky. I did find a coach that did not lie to me. Because then, the other thing is there's a lot of charlatans out there. And so they try to sell you their services. And then they grift you with like, oh, take this supplement or do this. It's easy. You just need to do this one thing here. And then
the influencer culture.
Oh my gosh. Right. And so they just want to take your money and keep you going, right? Just kind of keep you lashed on. And so I got very lucky. I didn't get somebody like that because she told me, you don't do what I say, you're fired. Like, I don't need your money. Like, go away. You don't want to actually do the work, then let me know when you're ready and don't waste my time. And I was like, whoa, like that's different. Like, wait a minute, there's something here. Right. And so I started taking it a lot more seriously. I dropped weight so fast. My body was so ready to get rid of that weight basically that I was carrying around. I mean, I can't even tell you my blood pressure was through the roof at the age of 38, right? All kinds of issues. And so all of these things quieted down. Even my perimenopause symptoms started subsiding. Yeah. And all the way up to the age of 50, which is this year, I'm going to be 50. My testosterone is at 45, right? And I'm 8 years post-menopause. My estrogen is kind of like doing its thing, right? But all this entire lifestyle shift has not just helped me with menopause, perimenopause, weight management, nutritional literacy, strength training, keeping my heart in good shape. I mean, the level of activity that I do now in the work that I do now is insane, like for somebody my age, right? And so, and I can honestly say I feel fantastic, and now I have the information and the education to be able to determine, like, do I need HRT, right? So when is the appropriate time to do that? Do I need XYZ? Is that a good idea, right? Do I need to eat more protein, less protein, more this, more that? And all of this information I didn't get from a school. I didn't get this from a class. I didn't get this from a doctor. It's very nuanced as well. So it's very bio-individual, right? So it takes a lot of time to get to this place, right? And so, like 50 years old, I feel great. I have no complaints.
So this is so important because I'm so glad that you bring up these several points, and just want to unpack these points a little bit more, because I see it all the time in both men and women, right? It's sort of like doesn't really, doesn't favor one gender over the other. But I think, for women, especially because we do go through this transition, the perimenopause, which is technically not even a recognized reproductive stage, so to speak, but we all know that exists. And of course, menopause, and then early and late after postmenopausal transition. But one of the things that I find so frustrating is that patients often are under the impression that they can address these very complex issues completely by themselves, that they don't need any help. They don't need any support, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of information out there. You can get on the internet, you can get on YouTube. I mean, this podcast will be on YouTube. People are going to learn something. There is the whole social media with lots of influencers who are trying to sell you anything you want, including research use peptides. And, I just saw a patient literally yesterday who is diabetic. He's been diabetic for a while, which he's sort of coming to terms with right now, started on medications, need to lose weight. His vascular age is about 15 years ahead of his chronological age. He has known coronary artery disease. He's sort of like the dry forest that once the match drops, there is this explosive forest fire. And he told me that, yes, his doctor started him on appropriate medications and we're working lifestyle and supplements. And somehow I hear that he managed to refill a prescription from a prior practitioner that was for one of the peptide medications. And I'm like, how are you able to do this without a doctor's supervision? Well, the pharmacy just dispensed it because I had a refill. I'm like, that's not what you're supposed to be doing because you're going to hurt yourself, right? So I think we're dealing with this sort of preconceived notion that a lot of adults have, that because there's abundance of resources, if they apply them to themselves, it's going to translate into a positive outcome, right? It almost reminds me, because you will understand this better than anyone. You grew up in Eastern Europe in a communist country, and I also grew up in a communist country in USSR. And the communists had this interesting mantra that they said, well, eventually the quantity will become quality. They use it for manufacturing process. And, if you did grow up in those areas, you know that quantity never became quality. That is not how it works. There's a whole, quality implementation process that has nothing to do with the quantity. But I think we're seeing this, is that quantity doesn't become quality. People start making a difference when there's a structured, planned intervention, whether it's with a health coach, physician, anyone who actually understands what are the root causes of the issues that are driving it. Then the differences do happen, because this is so classic. This is basically every single patient that we see. And I don't want to sound like people shouldn't try to follow a healthier lifestyle on their own. Of course they should. But, chances are that by the time, a lot of these chronic issues arise, simple measures are just not going to be enough. And, and one needs a structure, one needs a path.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something very important, right? The core driver of what's underneath the symptoms. And a lot of times, from what I have observed, it begins with insulin resistance and metabolic issues. And it might take 10, 20, 25 years before you actually see it manifest and show up as something you need to take serious action on. But it starts much earlier than that. And that's the phase that I was in, where everything just started getting really, really rocky and shaky. And I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. And it was pre-diabetes at that time, but it's not that serious, right? Yeah. And so, there was no action that got taken at that time, plus my age, So,
well, you were young, and we do know that women who go into menopause at a young age unfortunately have a much higher risk of cardiovascular disease. They are kind of that estrogen protection seems to wear off a bit too soon, so their coronary arteries, their vasculature in general doesn't get the benefit of estrogen, the whole nitric oxide, and vasodilation and anti-inflammatory properties. But insulin resistance is very tricky because most people wait for conventional blood tests, and conventional blood tests like hemoglobin A1C, for example, which is how insulin, not insulin, but diabetes criteria and pre-diabetes get defined. That is a late development. We know that our own tissues, and we teach it in functional medicine all the time, is that our liver, our muscle, our fat, they could become insulin resistant decades before you will see anything in the bloodstream. And there's subtle things on the blood work that we can detect. Like, for example, you can see, person's triglycerides to HDL ratio 2 or greater, and that's what's called, atherogenic index, although this is sort of a rule of thumb measure. The real atherogenic index gets computed in a different way, but at least it's a window of opportunity. Or they have LDL particles or ApoB that is sort of like trending up, and that this LDL size becoming smaller, so that this is what it is. This is how insulin resistance presents itself before hemoglobin A1C even starts to rise. And people have symptoms. They have these fluctuating blood pressure, fluctuating weight, sleep disruption, infections, inflammation starts to go off the charts. So, so the symptoms are there. It's just the medicine doesn't want to, they don't fit neatly in the box. Right. And then there is something else, maybe like, doctor says, oh, she's too young. She's 37. She's not supposed to have that. But you are having that. Right. And so that's where the problem is that, so much of medicine is sort of attempting to fit a person into some sort of a box, as opposed to really looking at them holistically and saying, well, what is going on here? What do we need to unwind and rebalance so that they can actually regain that metabolic flexibility, regain their metabolic health? And it sounds like you've been pretty successful in reversing.
Yeah, I mean, so far, no issues. Not that, it's not going to present again, because personally, I feel I have a predisposition to that. My grandmother had developed type 2 diabetes, and, eventually she succumbed to that. She had a congestive heart failure, but, a lot of different issues there. And yeah, I mean, personally, I feel the proper nutrition and strength training specifically were lifesavers for me, because it's incredible how quickly the body responds to the right stimulus. And all of a sudden, it was like day and night, and it happens very quickly. Yeah. And the results are just mind-blowing. It's the results were better than I could have ever imagined. And I see this all the time with women that attend my retreats, because I changed career paths. I realized I am a workaholic. I'm probably always going to be a workaholic. Once I get into something, I'm like fully into it. And so I needed to pivot. I needed to change where my attention was going. And instead of dedicating my life to artificial intelligence and software and all that, I would rather spend the same energy and time into lifestyle, health, wellness, movement, strength, things like that. And so now I do women's retreats, and I see women all the time that come, and I say to them, when you start this process, this lifestyle, you're going to see a 20, 25 pound drop just by changing your nutrition. And sometimes I hear things like, really, at this age? And I'm like, yeah, at any age, because your metabolic function and how your body processes food and reacts to strength training and movement doesn't change with age. There's very little change in how a 20-year-old responds to strength training and proper nutrition, and how a 50-year-old body is going to respond. It's very similar. And so this whole thing of like, oh, my metabolism is slow because I'm 50. In my experience, that's a myth. That's not true. And
that is actually what science says. So there is no such thing as remarkable slowing of metabolism. But what changes, I think, is the tissue sensitivity to what is happening with metabolism. And one of the problems is, and it's funny because I'm in a revision stage for my first book, which is called Longevity Switches. And I just finished revising the chapter when I'm trying to explain the concept of hallmarks of aging. And one of the hallmarks of aging is something called deregulated nutrient sensing. Right? So our body has a switch. It's an internal switch. It's a molecular switch that tells us, oh, nutrients are plentiful. Let's build things up. And then if you flip the switch the other way, when nutrients aren't that plentiful, maybe you're deficient, maybe you're restricting your calories, or you're doing intermittent fasting. And so the body says, well, the building is not happening. Nutrients are too low. It's time to clean up. So then it goes into the process of autophagy, right? Which is digesting cellular debris, taking care of these misfolded proteins, cleaning everything up, removing cells that are sort of in the the retirement zone. They're called, zombie cells, because zombie cells. Yeah. So kind of clearing all of this out. And we do it with our patients all the time, because we use sort of interventional nutrition, like fasting mimicking diets. They're insulin sensitizing, but they're also promoting autophagy. And so the problem with a lot of I think us adults, especially in developed countries, where sort of food is plentiful for most people, and some food is honestly junk food, and it is even more accessible. The problem is that switch, it never gets to be flipped to off. It's always on, and it's always build, 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 and so it becomes the cells of our body become like the houses that you see in TV, like that show, right? Hoarders, where things are basically stuffed to capacity. You cannot find anything. You just burning energy for the sake of burning energy. You're not producing anything. You're not cleaning anything out, and that's really becomes dangerous, because this is what aging is. So this is one of those hallmarks of aging. There's 11 more. And, I tried to explain it the best way I could, but, I think that's what a lot of, I'm sure a lot of women, when they come to work with you, those retreats, they may not even be realizing that they're stuck in that surplus build mode, and that's what their body is showing. Fat is piling up, pounds are piling up, because you've never been in the zone where you manage to flip that switch off and say, hey, let's do some cleaning here.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, what I notice is it's very interesting, because the first thing that I do with women is I want to do a full audit on their food. So the first ask is I want to see fully tracked in grams everything that goes in your mouth, right? And there's an app, there's lots of different tracking apps out there. And what I noticed, and this is now, I've been doing this quite a few years with about over 400 to 500 different women. And the trend that I see out there in the field is there's two, and of course the behavior changes because somebody's observing, right? So obviously,
of course,
we're
right.
account for that.
There's some confounders because you're being observed. Yes,
absolutely. But what I do notice is that most of so I go by the macros, right? So I want to see how much protein, carbs, and fat per day is each person eating. And then, the total calories, obviously. And so what I do notice as a very, very much a trend, on average, women are eating 50 to 60 grams of protein per day. And then the carbs and the fat are through the roof. Another thing that I notice is very inconsistent eating patterns, right? So like one day, 700 calories, next day, 2000 calories, following day, 600 calories, and then 5,000 calories, right? So it's all over the place, where there's no consistency with the amount of fuel that the body's getting. And then the quality of the fuel is obviously a lot of garbage, because carbs and fat are not exactly the building blocks for longevity, right? Depending on what they are. But when the majority of the diet is carbs and high fat, then we're looking at potentially not the right quality of food, for menopause, perimenopause. And so I noticed that, and just changing, not even reducing the calories in any way. What I'm noticing is just changing the quality of the calories that are coming in. Women are naturally, their body starts to change naturally. And then adding a little bit of walking, a little bit of strength training. And it's like, whoa, I feel 5 years younger in like a month is the feedback that I'm getting. Like I feel stronger. I feel more regulated, right? And another thing I have noticed is many times when we are in that stage, it's not that we don't know how to eat, it's that our nervous system is dysregulated. And so when the nervous system...
Our rhythm is off. The rhythm is off.
Nervous system is dysregulated. The circadian rhythm is all over the place. And the body's never in rest and digest, right? And so a lot of the functions that the body needs in order to feel good, in order to do all the other things that it needs to do, are not there. The foundation is not there. And so when we change some things around, like get enough food in, okay? Eating 700 calories a day is for a 9-year-old. Okay. That's
maybe.
Right? Exactly. And so
Right.
just being conscious of, are you eating enough every day, and are you eating consistently, and that it's giving permission to actually eat 1900 calories a day is a big deal for women. And that's, I think, the conditioning and the societal expectation that we're supposed to be really small, really tiny, and we're just need
and
to
live on air.
Right. And so it's completely unsustainable. So of course you're going to have 700 calorie days, and then followed by about 4,000 calorie day the next day or the day after, because it's not a sustainable thing. And it really blows my mind that like more people are not talking about this, because when I start, because I used to be that person. That's how I ate.
Right.
And then when I finally was taught that every flipping day you need to eat, and I think I started at 1850. It was 1,850 calories, and it was about 140 grams of protein, about 150 grams of carbs, and like 50 grams of fat. Every day I had to eat that. And when I tell you the first month, I couldn't get that food in. Can you believe that?
I believe that. And, I had seen this pattern and what you described earlier when you tried various restrictive diets and you failed. And I actually have a name for it. I call it the 3 O's, so over restrict, over fast, and overtrain. Because the pattern that I see in women, especially when they start noticing these perimenopausal, menopausal changes, is that they start to over restrict their diet. They start taking things out, and you're right. One day you could be very successful. The next day you'll be really hungry, and that bad food is going to sneak in. And then, they overfast. They go for 16 hours, 18 hours. There is no food. Well, that actually very often increases their stress level. Cortisol jumps up, insulin resistance rises, because you're not in what I would call the Goldilocks zone, right? You're in a zone of catabolism. You're burning, but not the right stuff, so this is sort of, that's where it comes out to. And overtrain, they hit the gym, they go into these very intense workouts. They don't give themselves time to recover. They're pounding the treadmill without realizing that you actually need to do resistance or strength training, because that conditions your muscle. That is the sink for your sugar and can actually make you insulin sensitive, even if you don't have much insulin around. So, so metabolically, they're putting themselves into this very severe, what I call it a Bermuda triangle, and, angled by my 3 O's, because they're going to be trapped inside of it. They're not going to come out. And the only way to come out is to literally reverse everything that people are doing, which is, psychologically is tough, because, that is societal condition. So tell us a little bit more about the House of Rose and what it is and the retreats, because that sounds like an interesting thing that, some of our listeners might be interested in.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned reverse, I call it reverse dieting, because I'm going to address this because I see this all the time and I experienced it. Reverse dieting is such a scary thing to a lot of women. But when somebody comes to me and their average is 700, 900 calories and they're still gaining weight, there's nowhere to go from there, right? So once you corner yourself in that place, there's nowhere to go. So there's no coach, there's no nutritionist, if they're any good, that's actually going to take you and help you lose quote unquote weight, because now you're actually perpetuating the problem. You're putting yourself in worse metabolic state where you're not doing yourself any favors, right? And so the only way out of that is to reverse diet, to cut the cardio out, cut the HIIT workouts out, focus on slow training, strength training, resistance training, progressive overload, and start increasing your calories correctly, right? Because a lot of times people say, I don't eat much, but then you do an audit and it's like, whoa, you had 4 things and they were 3,000 calories. So it doesn't look like much, but it was a lot.
That's another, truth that, as much as sometimes people are resistant to tracking, because let's face it, tracking does require commitment and attention, right? There are many great apps and they are, getting better and better. You can literally photograph your food and you'll know exactly what's in it or pretty close to it. But it's commitment, right? It's not like natural to log everything. But what I find is that we must track, because that's where the biggest surprises happen, right? That's where all of a sudden you look at that tracking log, and we do like 3-day food diary and all these sorts of things. And you're just like, oh, this is not what this person told us. They said, I'm a healthy eater. I'm mostly eating plants. I'm emphasizing protein. And you look at their food log and they're like, nope, that is not what the body is seeing.
Right. Exactly. And I hear this often. Oh, I can't track. Really? I mean, really? Really? Is that true? You don't have 5 minutes, because that's all it takes nowadays for the entire day, because you can snap a picture of it. Like the app that we use, that I use with my clients is Chronometer. Chronometer is HIPAA compliant, FDA approved metrics. You don't have to think that, oh, is this right? Is this correct? Is this user generated data? Like my macros is user generated, and for my Fitness Pal, there's all kinds of junk in there. Not Chronometer, right? On top of that, you can voice note into Chronometer and say, I had 3 ounces of chicken and 1 cup of broccoli and blah, blah, blah. And the thing enters it in for you. So if you cannot, I'm sorry, I'm going to get tough. If you cannot find time in the day to do this for yourself, it's time to evaluate more than just the food.
I agree so much, because, we use Chronometer. We also use, continuous glucose monitors, and we use a little device called Lumen. And, and I clearly see this because, patients sort of fall into 2 groups. Or the ones who say, I tried your device, it doesn't work for me. I'm like, well, it doesn't work for you because you actually didn't work for it, right? You didn't really give it the data. That's like, we asked you just to do it for 10 days and you didn't do it, and then the others say, hey, that's been such an eye-opener. I love using it because it actually gives me the visibility I've been missing. And so I feel like you're 100% correct, because it's not finding time. That's where I think a lot of people get it wrong. It's making time, because, there always will be something, right? There always will be kids, there will be trips, there will be work commitments. Your family wants you for something. There are always things, right? We're never going to be in a situation where your schedule is completely clear and that's that. And if you are in that situation, it usually happens because you're pretty sick and you were forced to clear your schedule. So, so making time, in my mind, and that's what, we coach patients on, that is not something that it's the key to success, because when you make that time, when you prioritize your health, it's the small things like you're mentioning. It's not something crazy. It's a small thing. It's 5 minutes per day, but consistency, right? Doing it, consistency. And that's really the reason, you can't make it up with anything else. There's no expensive peptide or peptide stacks or any, crazy things that you may want to do will do it for you if you're not consistent. I mean, would you agree?
Oh my gosh, the peptide thing. It drives me nuts because, people will go and spend $500 on peptides every month and avoid measuring their food, weighing their food, tracking, they're planning their food. Oh, really? I mean, really, you think a peptide is going to override what you put in your mouth on a daily basis?
Well, some of them do, because, the ones that we use, and, I use it personally, of course, tirzepatide,
Well,
Zepbound,
that's
and,
different. That's
semaglutide.
approved.
Well, yeah, they're FDA approved, and we only use FDA approved ones. But, but what I find is that you're right, because we work with patients to build foundation before these medications are applied. Because if you don't do that, you don't build that metabolic foundation, the moment the medication gets withdrawn or tapered off, all the pounds come back. And the research shows that over 70% of patients unfortunately regain within a year, right? So what makes a difference is that when that metabolism becomes balanced and flexible, then adding stuff to manipulate it more brings dividends. But if you just throw those major, powerful drugs into the mix, they will work, but the moment you stop using them, your body stops working. Essentially, that's a big problem, I think, for a lot of patients right now.
Yeah, I mean, personally, my opinion is that the people, I have a lot of clients on GLP-1s, tirzepatide specifically, and I hear firsthand, I'm told directly by clients that, I was on the tirzepatide for X amount of time, and then I started working with you, and all of a sudden I see results from the tirzepatide because I wasn't getting results before. So it's not a magic worker. Like, it's not a magic thing that all of a sudden you're going to do that and everything's going to change. Your habits are going to change. Your behavior is going to change. Your mindset's going to change. But it does give people a bridge. I feel like the people that are doing it correctly, they're leveraging what's available for them. Cause a lot of us, like I used to be hungry all the time. Right. So there are people that just are always hungry. Right. And so I feel that medications like tirzepatide and things like that give them that opportunity to begin to rewire, and maybe they'll always be hungry forever. I don't know. Like, I'm always hungry.
No, but you're right that it does quiet the food noise. And I think we also have to be aware of the fact that food noise is not sort of constant, right? Maybe for some people it's constantly high, but even within that high level, there is some variability. But what these medications are doing is that they're helping to control the food noise, and that sort of buys you time. Like, I remember, the first time I started these medications, I didn't really think of myself as an overeater, but I noticed that there are times when I finished eating and I sort of don't feel full. So of course I go for more. And, I'm a big fan of microdosing. We usually start at microdose with all of our patients just to kind of, prime the system, because these medications chemically, they're in the category of peptides, but they function as hormones, right? So, and there is actually a lot of overlap between peptides and hormones. So peptide is a chemical structure. Hormone is what that chemical structure actually does. And so the hormones, some people don't need much of them, and you need to sort of prime the system. And, and I think looking at these medications as hormones, at least in my mind, I do consider them type of hormonal replacement therapy, because I see women in perimenopause, menopause very quickly jumping into like estradiol and progesterone and testosterone. And they play a role, but I think the perception is, for many women, is that these hormonal replacement medications will solve every single problem. And that's just not true, because if you are not metabolically flexible, if your inflammation is burning you, if you are just stuck in that sort of Bermuda Triangle, the HRT is not going to help. It's not that level solution. It just can't deliver it, and we have research that supports that, so it's, I think, another, myth buster, because I see a ton of women on hormones, and we do hormones, of course. And, we literally, you mentioned reverse dieting, we literally reverse the paradigm, because we're like, let's use fewer medications and actually build your foundation, so that's what you're going to be building on for the rest of your life.
I see it every day. And the majority of my clients are obviously self-selected. So people that choose to work with me are already doing these things. So it's there's a little bit of a bias, but I do see a lot of women that are just beginning, or they're starting out, or they're at a place where I was at 13 years ago. And there's so much misconception with all of this, right? So, and I'll be honest with you, I'm so grateful that 13 years ago, there was no such thing as a GLP-1, because I would have been the first
you
one.
You would have been the first one in line. You would have been, give it to me.
I'd have been like, give me triple dose now. I was so desperate. Okay.
Well, triple dose is coming, right? You know, it's about to get, you know, it's just gotten FDA or about to get FDA approved. It's coming in 27. But, you know, but again, we have to ask ourselves, like, what is the end goal here, right? Is the end goal to create healthy metabolism, restore functionality of your internal cellular signaling, sort of rejuvenate yourself, you know, or just achieve weight loss at whatever goal that may not really be restorative from the health perspective, right? You know, so this is, you know, this is a tough one. So Terry, what is the House of Rose? Tell us about that. I'm intrigued by this House of Rose. I love roses, you know, I love, you know, everything to do with roses. What is the House of Rose?
So the House of Rose is my love child project. Because once an entrepreneur, you're always an entrepreneur. And it's a 50-acre property on the Smoky Mountain. So it's on a mountaintop, 360-degree views, and it's a restorative experience, right? So women arrive and we do yoga on the mountaintop every morning. We have healthy lunches, breakfast, dinners. We go out in nature. We hike, we walk, we swim in waterfalls in the Smoky Mountains. And we do restorative yoga. We talk about the stuff that you and I just talked about. And we talk about muscle as medicine. You know, the muscle is the first sink for insulin, right? So first place where you can stop insulin resistance from taking over, right? And so we talk about why is it so important to do resistance training, because a lot of women are still doing a whole bunch of other things and nothing's working, right? And we talk about macronutrition and how to structure meals. How much protein do you actually need? If you're currently eating 60 grams of protein, how do you get to 140, right? It's not going to happen overnight. How do you incrementally, progressively, slowly raise it up so you're not going to feel digestion issues, things like that. We talk about sleep, right? Because if we're not sleeping, forget about everything else.
That's true.
Number one priority, right? And nervous system regulation, emotional regulation, vagus nerve regulation, restorative yoga, yin yoga, the fascia. That's my new obsession. I am obsessed with the fascia and the lymphatic system. And so I can't shut up about it.
Well, important areas. I think I'm just sort of looking it up and getting into it, but I think very impactful. Right? You know,
fascinating.
Fascinating. We need to clear out our toxins. We need to definitely provide support to muscles and bones. And, you know, I think fascia and lymphatic system don't get nearly enough prime time because everyone wants to jump into, you know, bone health and muscle health. And, you know, and rightfully so, these are very important, but, you know, don't forget the support structures. And, you know, I always tell my patients and my colleagues is that muscle is considered to be the currency of aging, but it's your vascular system that sets the interest rate. So, you know, so if your vascular system is taxing you at a very high interest rate because you're hypertensive or have, you know, issues related to heart failure or, you know, syndromes of heart failure or coronary artery disease or structural or even, you know, arrhythmic heart disease, the interest rates will be high. And, you know, you're not going to get a lot from your currency. You know, the exchange will not be in your favor. So, you know, so remember that muscle is the currency of aging and, but vascular system sets the interest rate. So how can our listeners learn more about the House of Roses?
So you can visit thehouseofrose.com. All the information is on there, retreats, coaching, courses, all kinds of things. You can find me on Instagram. How good can it get? And those are the only two places really. I have other channels, but 2 is enough, I think.
So you're a reformed entrepreneur. I could see that you're a recovering entrepreneur.
Recovering entrepreneur. That is such a great term.
Because I'm trying to become recovering entrepreneur myself. It doesn't mean that I'm stopping projects. Actually, just the opposite. I have a lot of projects, but I'm trying to make sure that my projects are aligned in a way that makes sense, and, focusing on holistic and integrative cardiovascular health, wellness, longevity, so that all of them sort of wrap into that, even though they appear to be slightly different. But yes, well, Terry, as one recovering or semi-recovering entrepreneur to another, it's been a blast. I learned a lot. Hopefully one day I'll visit the House of Rose. It sounds absolutely stunning, and and really what our busy lives needs. And before we break, your top 3 things you wish every woman did when she crosses 50. Maybe like not before 50, but you're about to cross 50. I crossed 50 some time ago. Actually, my birthday is in about 3 days. So I will be
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'll be in my late 50s, but, so what should every woman who is 50 or older know or do, top 3 things that absolutely a must. What do you think they are? I'm only curbing you to 3. That's on purpose.
It's going to be spicy.
Okay, go for it.
Number 1, have an absolutely mind-blowing, just crazy love affair.
Okay. You can do it with your husband or boyfriend, by the way. So that qualifies. Okay.
Travel to a place you never in your wildest dreams thought that you would ever visit. Just go outside of your comfort zone.
I like that.
And say no as many times as you want.
I love that. Say no as many times as you want. And you know what? When you're 50 or older, you no longer have the trepidation of saying no and as many times as you want. But, it was fantastic to have you. And, thank you for being my guest and, for bringing this awareness about metabolism and insulin resistance to women and for setting up the House of Rose. It sounds like fun. And, we'll drop you links for our listeners in case they want to check it out.
Thank you, Dr. Druz. You are absolutely amazing. I love this conversation. Such good information. You're putting out really fantastic information. And I really hope everybody that finds you tells about your podcast to everybody that they know, because it's critical. It's absolutely critical.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Own Your Heart Health with Dr. Regina Druz. This podcast is powered by Holistic Heart Centers. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about our services, visit holisticheartcenters.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The link is in the show notes. See you next week.